everybody. So I'm laying here in the bed, and as you can see the TV, as you can see the title right there. So credit goes up to his channel. I never seen this guy before. It was in my feed. As you can see, I'm gonna go back here. It just showed up in my feed, like you know. So let's watch this video and let's get his opinion.
I think the world
and
of my daughter, and the world keeps thinking she's just pretty good.
And the audio from the air traffic control, which is pretty hard to dispute.
You're going to see a back and forth now between...
Hang on. So, like I said, usually the audio from the air, from the ATC is pretty indisputable. And there's another movie that I can think of that kind of does the same thing, where it's about like a UFO sighting. It was like 2018 movie, got Gillian Anderson. And I forgot the name of the movie, but it's a really good. And the kid listens to the ATC recordings on a website and discovers that there's like, and then researchers like T-Mobile and Verizon like outages, but T-Mobile had the higher like outages in the area because of the sighting and that frequency range. So frequencies are definitely affected, but yeah, like I said, ATC recordings are pretty indisputable, okay? And that's all I can say. Now, I do have an SDR. If I was running that SDR at the time and running that ADBS, I think it's called, ADBS, and turn airplane mode off, I probably would have seen the squawk of the aircraft, but not the helicopter. Apparently, the helicopter was completely radio silence, which I think is wrong. You should never ever do that, even if it's a training exercise. You don't do radio silence. And being so close to the Pentagon there, and Reagan, and being a black helicopter, especially at night, close to the White House, they never should have turned their transponder off. That is the number one suspicious thing, right? To not have a transponder turned on. Now, it could have been satellite tracked. Now, that's the difference. Basically all your military aircraft, they can be satellite tracked, controlled, everything nowadays, right? And that is a much higher frequency line of sight kind of communication with however far the satellites are, whether they're geostationary, geosynchronous, low Earth like orbit, high Earth orbit, whatever band it is, could be C-band, K-band, SU, I don't know, I'm still trying to learn about ham radio and frequencies and all that. But yeah, they never should have been radio silence. But let's see what he has to say, and let's see what the recordings say, and we'll base it off of that, and go from there. Because like I said, me and thousands of others don't think this was just a coincidence, just an accident. It was for a reason why this happened. And I didn't know about it until my girlfriend told me, because I was busy yesterday doing stuff, I think it was, or the day before. So I had no idea that even happened until she told me, and I looked it up.
Here's what happened last night. I'm able to secure the actual audio from the incident over the Potomac last night. Let's listen in together.
789, contact so far today. Okay. American Second 134 to follow.
You're going to see a back and forth now between Reagan Tower and the various aircraft that they have lined up on approach into the airport. This happened at about 8:46 p.m. Last evening, and you can see there's several airplanes lined up. That's typical coming in about that time of night at Reagan. They're talking to American Airlines 3130, which I think is number 2 for the runway. They're telling them to slow down to their final approach.
Let's
at Reagan.
Let's pause this real quick and let's look at this map, because maps like that they confuse me more than a regular Google like default map. Of course, because this is like an aircraft mapping thing. So let me see here. My head will be in the way. All right, I know where Alexandria is. Oxon Hill, okay, I know where that's at. I know where Annandale is, yep. I know where Seven Corners is. I've been in those areas. I've been to Alexandria, yeah. Suitland, been to Forestville. I've been all over the area. Just trying to find 495 and the 14th Street Bridge, 395 areas. I know where Reagan is because of the fact. Yeah, I know where Reagan is because I used to ride the bike over there when I had a bicycle and a wagon attached to it. I would ride from downtown DC to Reagan and back. I don't know why. Don't ask me why I did that. I just did it. I went to Theodore like Island, south of Roslyn. Went into Roslyn, rode a bike on the GW Parkway, which I wasn't really supposed to. I rode it past the Pentagon once, to and from on the actual shoulder of the GW Parkway, which I probably wasn't supposed to. Just randomly happened, and I was just trying to explore the area. 2013, 2014, I think it was. Somewhere in there. I think I even took the pedicab almost to the 14th Street Bridge a few times too. So yeah. Let's watch the video.
American Airlines 3130, which I think is number 2 for the runway. They're telling them to slow down to their final approach speed because they're separating everybody on the way in. It's going to turn out that American 3130 is a key player in what happens here.
Oh, American 3130. Pat 25, traffic just off the Wilson Bridge is CRJ.
Pat 25 is the helicopter that ran into the CRJ 700. It was a PSA flight. The flight number is 5342. It would go under the call sign Blue Streak. Blue Streak 5342. You don't ever hear them talking to tower. They've already been cleared to land on runway 33. So they would come in on an approach on runway 1, and then they would kind of circle the land on runway 33. It's a little shorter runway, but they take some of the regional jets and they put them on that runway. Pat 25 is the Black Hawk helicopter that is just south of the Woodrow Bridge, and they've just taken off. They're airborne. The tower is saying to them, there's traffic. It's a CRJ. It's at 1,200 feet, lined up for runway 33. Do you have that traffic? Pat 25 is going to call back and say yes.
1,200 feet, start runway 33.
Pat 25 says, has the traffic in sight, request visual separation. What that means is that they're going to take responsibility for visual separation from that aircraft. What happened? Here's what I think happened. This is not the final word on it, but what I think happened was, it was at night. There's several airplanes lined up. There is that Blue Streak 5342, which is the CRJ that they ran into. Right behind them, just a few miles, is American 3130. Everybody has their lights on as they're coming in. I believe the helicopter looked at the American 3130 and said, I've got the traffic in sight, and they never saw the airplane, the CRJ, that was right next to them. That's my conjecture on what happens.
Special separation. This separation group. American 1630 tower, runway 1 off wood, traffic direct off runway 33, dispatch 16 off funnel.
So this is typical stuff that's going on in a busy airport. They're lining somebody up to take off. They're saying, pay attention. I'm going to give you an immediate takeoff here. I've got traffic lining up for runway 33. That's the CRJ that got ran into. And he's on a 6-mile final. It might be somebody even behind him, but they're lining everybody up to take off into land.
Please keep it 307. Keep rolling out to November, South 47 today.
You can see at the bottom of your screen there, the CRJ, the Blue Streak 5342. They're beginning to now kind of come out a little bit to line up the runway to land on runway 33. They're not going to go right straight down the river. They got to come out a little bit wider and come in. But remember, Pat 25, which is up here, the helicopter at the middle of your screen, they've already said we accept responsibility for visual separation.
American 1631 star 3214, Delta 5, traffic 2-mile elevation, runway 33, no delay, runway 15 for B to
There's
take off.
American to take off.
Clear for takeoff, American 1630.
Here it comes.
Get the surgery in flight.
Now the tower is seeing what's happening, and they're saying, do you have the CRJ in sight? Because you guys are getting kind of close. And the Pat-25, the helicopter, says once again, yeah, and I'm asking for visual separation. Okay, the responsibility is on you then.
Pat-25, Pat-1 is CRJ. Pat-5 has an aircraft in sight, request visual separation.
Okay, so Pat-25 says, has the aircraft in sight, request visual separation. I don't think they had these guys in sight. I think they had the airplane behind them in sight. That's why this is such a tragedy.
I mean, what he says is making sense. It does make sense. But I don't know.
American 472 by Bath now for visual. American 472 walks down 1 star 3Q17.
So you hear somebody in the tower go, oh, and they see what just happened. As you can see in your screen here, the collision took place. The tower has seen it happen in real time. They're human beings. They're reacting just like you and I would. The helicopter ran into the CRJ. The CRJ's airspace was their airspace. In front of them, behind them, on both sides of them, it was a responsibility of the helicopter to maintain visual separation. They even told him a couple times, do you got him in sight? Do you got him in sight? He said, yep, got him in sight. I'm accepting responsibility for the separation. And I think just like when you're driving in a car and you look and you see a car behind the one that almost hit you, you see that car and you didn't see the one right here. And when you turn out in front, sometimes there's a collision. It's really tragic when this happens in an airplane. Again, it's been decades since there's been a mid-air collision in this country. This is such an unusual circumstance to take place. It's such a tragedy. It's been 12 years since there's been a fatality in a commercial airliner here in the United States. That's unprecedented. And that wasn't a mid-air collision. That was just an accident. This is a mid-air collision, and this hasn't happened in forever. So now we know what's going on here. Pat-25, the helicopter, accepted responsibility for visual separation. They probably had their eyes on the airplane behind them, and then they tragically ran into these guys.
Did you see that? 472. American 3130, go around turn left and 250, climb maintain 3000.
So now what happens from the tower's perspective is they have to work through denial pretty fast. They just saw this happen in real time in front of them. They're human beings like the rest of us. They're kind of in shock. But they've still got airplanes coming in. They've got American Airlines 1630, which just took off. They've got to hand them off to departure. They got American 3130 that's coming in. They got American 472 behind them. They got to do something with these airplanes. The airplane port is going to be shut here in a second. So they're going to start telling all these guys to go around while they're trying to handle the emergency and get the emergency equipment out. And all of that is, everybody's kind of in a little fog for a few seconds here while all of this is taking place. The tragedy of it hits you hard. And they're very professional. Watch how they handle this. But man, they're busy.
Let's say 350, 3000, American 3130. Tower, Blue Street, 5347 is on final. Request runway 33, circle to 33. Take it, heading to American 3130. American 3130, go on. Someone been 270, fly maintain 3000. 270 heading 3000.
See how fast he's talking? He's trying to get all these other airplanes out of here.
Crash. This is alert 3. Crash.
Okay, what's MWAA? It's the Metro Washington Airport Authority. Every airport has some sort of governing authority over it. Many times it's called the Port Authority. Up in Boston, it's Mass Port, right? In New York, it's the Port Authority. Down here in Washington, it's the Metro Washington Airport Authority. They're now announcing officially there's a crash. So they go over the radio and they broadcast to everybody. The tower is the main recipient of this, that there's been a crash. He's going to repeat that. That puts a whole bunch of things into motion all at the same time.
I wonder if this guy named Sean was still in the area and he had his radio, because I had programmed it for the NWAA fire department in Virginia. I'm not going to say where because I don't want to give away his location or anything like that. But he knows more about this stuff than I would. I mean, he seems to be pretty smart. But he probably would have heard that. It probably that that alert probably was transmitted every fucking radio at all the regional like airports in the DC like area. You know, the two major ones that we have, and then of course, you know, BWI. It probably was transmitted all throughout. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it was. And if I had the radio reference account, I can go back on the radio transmission to see if I could have heard it. But of course, that expired because I'm not going to pay for another year. But that would have been something to hear, though, you know. So yeah, that's pretty crazy. But I want to give you another XTS 5000 so I can program it and have Fairfax, Prince William, Frederick, you know, all those counties. And what I really want to do is I want another radio that I could do statewide system too, the 400 megahertz ones, which I do have, but they're harder to program though. So, but yeah, crazy shit, right?
The fire crews now are going to jump in their uniforms. They're going to get in their fire trucks. They're going to drive to where the crash is. There's going to be details about this coming, but this whole thing is very frenzied and happens very fast. But these are really highly trained professionals. They do a really terrific job.
Yeah. Yeah, they drill. They run constant drills and scenarios.
And alert 3 is a crash.
Where's the alert 3? It is off the approach at the runway 33. Approach at the runway 33. Helicopter crash. Helicopter. Copy out this morning. Crash. Alert 3. 2 helicopters.
No.
Okay, so
no.
Again, fog of war. The first report that they get is that it's 2 helicopters.
No.
They're going to clarify this really quickly because the tower's talking back and forth, and the tower's going to say, nope, it was a CRJ and a helicopter. So they get this, it's cleared up pretty fast.
Well, helicopter CRJ approaching runway 33.
That's really fast.
The approach in runway 33, a mile long final. Crash. Kilo CRJ approaching 33. Okay. How many totals on board? We don't have any of that information. Tower's reporting a CRJ and a helicopter crash.
So they're passing the information back and forth to the first responders who need it. Everybody's trying to clarify while they're jumping in their trucks and they're heading out there. Now they know exactly where they're going. It's at the approach end of runway 33. It's somewhere in the Potomac. Now they're going to have to coordinate boats and other things. Eventually they're going to get helicopters involved.
Can we go ahead and hold all operations till we have emergency units respond? We're going to go ahead and show the aerodrome closed.
They want to close the airport so they can go.
Yeah, that's affirmative. All operations aerodrome closed.
Everything's closed.
And everybody just hold your positions, please, on the field right now.
Okay, so this is the ground controller. Now, the ground controller is the one that's going to get all these trucks going where they need to go. But the ground controller needs to stop all the airplanes. So she just makes a blanket broadcast. Everybody stop right where you are. Every once in a while, you kind of half hear that, and then you say, okay, I'm sorry. And there's also people asking to be released from their gate to go. They're not into what's going on yet because they just put their headsets on and they're just getting ready to go. One aircraft's going to ask to do this, and she's just going to say, everybody stop.
South 43, ready for taxi.
Everyone's going to have to hold for now. I'll get back to you just as soon as I can. Fire command, the accident happened in the river. Both the helicopter and the plane crashed in the river. It's east of the approach end of runway 33.
It's amazing to me how much clarity they have about actually what happened and where it happened. Many times in an accident like this, it takes 5 to 10 minutes just to get everything sorted out. They're very good here at getting it all very concise, and so the response time was phenomenal on this.
Ahora, hacer tus impuestos es bajar la app de TurboTax.
Yeah, he's actually right about that. It seems like the response time is a lot faster than what it was. So, I'm sorry, but that seems suspicious to me. I mean, I do like the response time. I like the way that they're communicating. I like the way everybody's being professional. clear, concise. I do absolutely love that. I love stuff like that.
Yes, the airfield is closed. The airfield is closed.
Runways as well.
Okay, ARF is the Aircraft Rescue and Firefighters. That's the actual fire chief that's in the fire truck. He's asking, is the airport closed and are all the runways closed as well? That way he can expedite getting out there. He doesn't have to stop and ask, can I cross this runway? Can I go on that taxiway? She's about to tell him, the whole place is shut down. You go. You own the airport now.
Yep.
All runways are closed. Nobody's landing. No one's moving at all.
And we have clearance across all taxiways, correct?
Yes, you have clearance through the whole field, all taxiways and runways.
So basically she's saying to these guys, go. And at that moment, the fire trucks take off. What we know about the accident at this point is that there were no survivors. It's now a recovery operation. That's the sad part about all of this, and that's the part that really hits us hard right here. But I know you wanted to hear what happened and maybe my response to how they handled this emergency and what led to it. It looks pretty clear at this point that the helicopter had accepted visual separation. That's when they make that call, when they're cleared for that. They said, yep, we've got the airplane in sight, and the airplane they had in sight was the wrong airplane. There was another one in between that and the one that they were looking at. And sadly, they ran into that aircraft. So folks, we're hoping that this never happens again. I know that my annual training, I will certainly get some training on avoiding mid-air collisions. I have over my career, but they will refresh this as more details about this situation comes out. And the really wonderful part about that is they share all of the information they get, the FAA, with every other airline around the planet, so we all can avoid having a tragedy like this happen in the future. We will train to make sure that this never happens again. Well, there you go. Sorry for this, but pray for these people. All right? I'm Captain Steve, and I'll see you.
So there's been some exciting
It's crazy. Let's see what other videos were suggested. Maybe we can. Let's see what comes up under his videos.
Here's
here.
what happened last night.
Former air traffic control gives perspective of deadly. Okay. Let's see what they got to say.
Tonight, we're still trying to make sense of last night's deadly mid-air
collision Channel 9
at Reagan National Airport. We know it only took a split second for things to go wrong.
Yeah, we want to play some of the audio from air traffic control in the seconds after that.
Now, I'm going to tell you, everybody, you cannot always trust the mainstream medium. You can't. Bottom line. Cannot trust them. They'll cut people off in mid-sentence interviews and all that good stuff. And I got a video that proves the very same thing, that they cut this guy off. He was trying to explain what he saw prior to the collision. So, and they cut him off, and they went to, the anchor desk. So you can't always trust what they say. And no, I wasn't like this my whole entire life. I just started thinking about it, started to come to realizing things like this over the last 2 to 4 years now. Somewhere in that range, probably the last 4 years, okay? Before that, I never once thought about mistrusting the media, But with everything going on, whole different story. But let's see what they have to say, okay?
Crash, and we do have to warn you, this clip includes video that is really hard to watch.
I just saw a fireball and then it was just gone. So I haven't seen anything since they hit the river, but it was a CRJ and a helicopter that hit. I would say maybe a half mile off the approach end of 3-3.
Is the airfield closed?
Yes, the airfield is closed. The airfield is closed.
Runways as well?
Yes, all runways are closed. Nobody's landing. No one's moving at all.
And that's the voice that we heard previously, the ground controller that was speaking in the previous video.
He was a former FAA certified professional controller. Thank you for being here with us.
Thanks for having me, unfortunately, under these circumstances.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, you understand the challenges and the complexities that controllers face every day. Take us into what that's like.
Well, what it's like is every day is unique unto itself. You come in with an anticipation that there's a certain order, certain flow to what happens in your facility because you're accustomed to the schedule, the number of flights, how they normally move, but then there's a dynamic portion to it that is often unscripted and unpredictable. Things like weather that often come up without warning, that could drastically change how you respond to what is otherwise a routine day. Issues like equipment malfunctions, what happens when things beyond your control, like we saw on 9/11, that automatically an event in New York changes the entire system in real time.
And you were there.
I was there. I worked in Chicago that day. I remember that day when we were, quite honestly, forcing commercial aircraft to the nearest airplane, and they could either land with an escort or without one. But it was just that serious. And when you don't really know what's going on, all you have are the tools and the rules, right?
You know what? Come to think of it, there's a really good movie that kind of talks about how controllers are and what they face. It's with Kiefer Sutherland and the one guy who played in 2012. I forgot his name. And trying to remember who else there was. But it's a pretty good movie. It's about the challenges that they face. You know what I mean? It's a really good movie. You should check it out. I'll try to find a name when I can.
Tools of the trade being the radio frequency, the lessons that you've learned, the skills that you've developed to be able to respond to situations that you didn't anticipate, and there is no book for it.
Yeah. Let's talk about last night, because the Associated Press is reporting that there was one person working and doing two jobs in that air traffic control tower there at Reagan. One person typically oversees the helicopters, one person oversees the planes. Does that sound plausible?
It sounds plausible simply because there are a number of factors that go into staffing. The air traffic day is kind of like an accordion. It expands and contracts based on demand and need. And so your staffing will start relatively low early in the day, it will peak at a point, and then it will gradually scale back until you get to the later parts of the day. And so in my own experience, it was not uncommon to work a combined sector, what we would call it, and later in the night, as I would often work third shift, sometimes we would combine multiple sectors into one simply because there was no demand. It allowed us to preserve and reserve resources when we actually needed them, and it didn't compromise the safety. So the mere fact that these positions may have been combined does not necessarily say to me that that was in and of itself a safety issue. What is a bigger concern based on what I've seen is whether or not the proximity of the aircraft, one on final approach, one that's transiting around the airspace, what were the instructions given? Was there information given that made one or the other?
Yeah, I was gonna say that
they were in the same general.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Were those instructions in that advisement? Were those acknowledged?
You've had
and
an
you see that.
To listen to some.
You guys see that?
See...
You guys see that, right? I've seen that on that app that I was telling you about. You know, with the RTL SDR dongle and the app, and using the generally, I think they transit 900 some megahertz at 1800 megahertz, I believe it is. There's two different AD, I think it's ADSB or something like that is what it's called, like I was saying before. And I've seen paths like that here in the area. I've seen planes show up on there that were way up in Pennsylvania, way up in southern New York. I've seen them squawk, and that was pretty cool. I've seen them as far down as North Carolina, squawking. It shows their airspeed. It shows their transponder number, tail number, I believe it is, and the airspeed and the altitude. And that gives you a lot of information. And I believe latitude and longitude also would show up. I'm not sure exactly, but I believe they could squawk a lot of that data. And I've seen where planes would come in like that and then go up and then go in the Reagan, and I've seen it at the Dulles also. So that's pretty cool.
what little video we've been able to see of that tragic moment midair. What do you think occurred as someone who has directed air traffic in and out of airplanes for decades?
Nah, damn commercials.
Check-in time is...
But I don't want to be sitting here monitoring plane traffic for days on end, which I don't have hard drive space to even record on like that. I just don't, you know? But there is systems out there that just record it and keep track of it for forever. It's crazy.
So in Chicago, it's often controlled airspace where the control towers and the approach controls are actually staffed. Late at night, some air traffic control towers actually shut down, and so it's the regional center that controls from the ground all the way up to the ceiling of the National Airspace System. What I think, I don't know what happened. Let me give you a better sense of what I would raise as questions. Question number one is for any aircraft, whether it is rotor or fixed wing, when they're in that proximity, very often we do what we call calling traffic. Was traffic called? That means simply because they're in proximity and one may have equipment, they may not be, the pilots, the crew may not be paying as close attention to what's going on around them because they have things that they're focusing on the flight deck. So I believe traffic would have been called. As a matter of fact, the bit of radio transmission to the military helicopter as, do you have the CRJ in sight? That says to me that traffic...
Can you see that jet?
Can you see that jet? Mm-hmm. That says before that, there was probably an advisory that says, Pat 25, you have traffic at a position, at an altitude, this is the direction it's moving, do you have it in sight? If you have it in sight, maintain what we call visual separation from that traffic, and then you can kind of proceed on course. That's kind of the question that I initially have as to the instruction and the advisory that was given. Was it heard? Was it understood? Now, here's the caveat. Having flown on the flight deck and observed flight crews, when you're flying at night particularly, you don't see airplanes the way you and I would expect to see airplanes when we get on them at airports. Mm-hmm. If these airplanes are against a dark sky, challenging ground lights, what you're really looking for is not so much the physical attributes, but can you see the beacon, the flashing light that goes on top, that little red thing that goes on or at the bottom. Mm-hmm. And so if you pick up the beacon, can you distinguish the beacon from other lights, residual lights that are coming from the ground? And can you keep it in your sights? Because remember, it's not just stationary. This airplane's moving. So the CRJ, depending on what its landing profile was, could have been moving at a speed of about 130 knots just before it gets ready to touch down. We don't know what the speed profile was of the helicopter, right? So once I see it, I've got to see it and track it. But if I'm seeing it and tracking it, can I then observe and pay attention to everything else I have to do with the flight controls? So there are a number of dynamic realities that we cannot capture in a soundbite or in a clip, which is why the role of the NTSB and all of the subject matter experts is so critical to help us.
What he just said makes absolute perfect sense. This guy is fucking smart, in my opinion, but that's my opinion. But he knows exactly what he's talking about. I don't know. It just felt right. And I'm a skeptic. I skeptic everybody who I come across, like initially, and then if they give me a bad vibe, I don't trust them, or I kind of reserve trust for them. But then if I get a better vibe, my trust is like almost immediate. But this guy, I could probably trust. I'm a little skeptic, but not as skeptic, you know. So what he says makes perfect sense, though. But yeah, a lot of your flights, I believe, when they're coming in, they're doing what, 100? What's the stall speed on some of them regional jets? And isn't it 120 knots or is it 125? Like, I mean, I'm using the phone to record here the live video, so I can't really be looking the information up once I grab my tablet and do it. I'm thinking stall speed is minimum 115 or 120, right, for a regional. let me know in the comments below what you guys think. And if there are 1,200, they're around 1,200. I mean, like give or take several feet or tens of feet or whatever it could be. But 1,200 feet, that ain't too high. That's about as high as some of your tall, your pretty tall TV towers. I mean, this van could do what, 1,200 feet in like a few seconds at 60 miles an hour, right? So, yeah, that ain't much if you really think about it.
Understand what's happening.
Yeah, you're talking about these dynamic realities here, and we think of this airspace in particular, which is extremely unique. You have hundreds of flights going in and out of Reagan National Airport every day. You have these military helicopters flying over the district at all hours of the day as well. So for these air traffic controllers, this is sort of a delicate dance all day.
I think dance is right. It's a choreography that is often impacted by circumstance. Now, I've looked at a couple of tracks of the movement. I'm not sure if maybe the helicopter took an early turn on course, if it veered off course, we don't know, right? So this isn't about assigning a blame one way or the other. It's really kind of understanding what's going on at that moment that led to the catastrophic.
I don't know if anybody ever thought about this, but why don't most aircraft, yes, they are transmitting their data in real time through that transponder, right? But why can't black box data and voice, video, whatever be associated and stream it to a server, right? And anytime they fire up their aircraft to the time they just shut it down, where they're going, right? Or where they're returning to, why can't every aspect be live streamed? There's no excuse for it nowadays. It could be transmitted via satellite, cellular, dedicated radio system, like data lines like P25. It could be anything, right? You would think a Black Hawk helicopter that could be autonomously remote controlled, right? And there's some research on that, and there's some, if you Google it up, they can autonomously control the aircraft. There's absolutely no reason why there wouldn't be some kind of data sitting on a server somewhere within the Pentagon or wherever that may be, and that data has video, flight, cockpit, voice recordings. If there was anybody actually in the flight deck of the helicopter, if it was remotely controlled, that's possible too. Because like I said, some people have a working theory that the helicopter was remotely controlled and it was targeting that specific aircraft. Now, the people controlling the aircraft, they could be anywhere, right, in the world with a headset on and still talk to the tower. That is, that's all done through satellite linking and then the radios on the helicopter itself. They can all be patched together. They're talking through a satellite connection, IP based, right? And then it connects to the radio inside the helicopter, which is using the 130 some megahertz AM broadcast, right? AM frequencies to the tower, ground, or whatever that may be, right? And yes, you can get all frequencies for many airports. They're all public, with knowledge. So what I'm saying is, it is possible that helicopter wasn't even staffed. So that's a working theory there.
Outcome that now has 67 people lost and their families grieving, and the rest of us raising a lot of questions.
Yeah.
We have talked, as we have tried to contextualize what happened yesterday, and it's still so fresh. It's been about a day, really, since this happened. And one of the points of conversation that we've heard come up, and you know this from your many years of being an air traffic controller, is that there simply aren't enough of you. And how much of a role that might have played leading up to what happened yesterday, or not?
Well, I think it's always a factor that you consider sufficient resources, particularly staffing, right? Air traffic control is not one of those vocations that you pass off to some virtual reality. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
The other part is to understand the history of how we even got here. Part of my own story is remembering that when I hired into the agency, I was part of one of the last cohorts that was being hired to fill the losses that were tied to the firing of the controllers after the PATCO strike. So you have a large number of your workforce of about 14,000 controllers that are really hired within a window of about a decade. Let's just call it about 10 years. You add 25 years to that. You have to hire before you're 31. You can retire after 25 years. You have to retire at 56.
So no more directing traffic after 56.
You cannot control live traffic.
Interesting.
After 56. So your 56th birthday, you're done with live traffic. Now, you may do administrative duties or something else, but moving live traffic is not what you do. So when you look at that, you have that same cohort, that period of a decade, hiring after the PATCO strike in 81. You had 25 years, give or take. So I hired in almost 1990, so you got 2015, depending on the age. We've got a number of losses that are going to be successive year after year, either by mandatory retirement or the increasing gap, because you don't just hire a controller today and put them in a position tomorrow. It took, and I think I was on the short end of the average training time at Chicago Center. It took me 3.5 years from the time I got to the facility to the time that I was fully certified. So it takes some time. You've got to add the time to go through the administration of the test, the staffing of the screen classes in Oklahoma City, the assignment to the facilities based on their individual needs, the training time that's required to get them through that unique training scenario for wherever they're assigned, Reagan being unique to, say, LaGuardia being unique. There's some general principles, but the airport layouts are different. And so I think there is an oversimplification that has imposed itself on this tragedy that says that we want to give sound bites and milquetoast responses to what is really a much more complicated.
You know what I personally think, though? I think that on the ATC screens, on the radar screens, yes, track them by radar, right? But also incorporate, and yes, they do incorporate the transponder data, you know, airspeed, altitude, flight number, all that, right? It does pop up on the radar screen, but they also should be using GPS data, and what else could they be using? GPS data, and I would imagine that they do. I don't know. I've never been in a control tower, and I would never be able to even get to that point, just because, you know, they just wouldn't let me do that. There's no way, unless I was vetted really good, you know, which is not going to happen. But I just wonder if they're using every data point available to track aircraft, at least down to the square foot. Get it down to the square foot at the bare minimum, and show it on the screen going that speed, instead of just like, you know, boop boop boop, right? Show it zooming across the screen. I mean, yeah, it'd be harder to see, but I don't know. I mean, would that help? No, probably not. Yeah, it'd be too fast. I don't know. I mean, at least get the resolution of the tracking better, I would think.
Scenario. And we also have to remember that the last mid-air collision before last night was 1978. So it's not, the safest system always has vulnerabilities, right? We learned that last night. We knew that before last night. It was just brought to our awareness in a much more urgent sort of way. How we respond to it is the way that we go about making sure that we don't have a repeat of what happened last night, right? And so I think that's the big takeaway that I have from what I've seen over the last 24 hours.
And you mentioned the job has been simplified to a degree. You know, we see that air traffic control tower, and most folks don't know what's going on in there. So what is needed for this job? And I think you look at the images, you see the radar screen in front of the person.
I gotta turn my heater off. It's getting hot in here.
Folks really don't understand what the job entails, clearly.
Well,
turn the water heater back on.
Good training, It takes the ability to respond emotionally, cognitively, psychologically on a dime.
Yeah.
It requires the ability to be able to live in the crucible of an adrenaline rush that ebbs and flows.
You're like our first responders in the sky, essentially.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect analogy to it. Add to it that the first responders in the sky, even when it's routine, it's pressure filled, right? Even on a clear night, when you can see the stars, if you just go back and listen to what happened in the moments right after the crash occurred, you hear the transmission of someone from the control tower relaying to the emergency team, this is what happened, this is what the aircraft that were involved, this was the position. If you listen to that voice is pretty much calm.
Very calm, yeah.
Very calm, very clear, because what has to be communicated cannot get lost in transmission. And so I think a lot of times folks who've never been in a tower cab, never been in a radar room, never sat on a flight deck to understand the nuances of what happens in real time, they provide commentary to things that they don't really understand.
Can you help us understand what we have been talking about quite a bit, which is near misses?
I like the way that he explains things. He is good.
We
He's
are still
fucking
waiting
good.
to get all of the details about what happened yesterday, so this is not a pontification about that. But since we're talking about it, and we know that this has been an issue at a crowded and very dense Reagan National Airport, how does one avoid that as a controller?
Well, one, we got to be clear on what we're talking about with a near miss, right? So a near miss is a category of a loss of acceptable separation between aircraft. Are these near misses on the ground? If they're on the ground, are they on an active taxiway? Is it on a runway? Is it in what we often call the alley where the gates are, right? So a lot of it is what is.
I thought they called crashes incursions. That's why I thought they called it, or a close incursion. That's why I thought it was called.
But to the point, here's what has happened. After 9/11, the air traffic control system shut down, literally.
Yep.
I remember working that day as Air Force One left Offutt Air Force Base. President Bush was in Florida that morning. He went to Omaha. He was in the bunker. He left Omaha to get to D.C. because he wanted to speak to the nation. I was working that afternoon when that flight passed through the area that I was assigned to. I was a manual controller. A colleague of mine was working on the radar. There were military aircraft that were running their routine operations that Air Force One did not really even know. They don't even know that these operations go on. And when they looked at the radar on the plane, asking, what are those planes out there? And we told them those are military aircraft. The captain of Air Force One told us, move them. Right? So when we think about this notion of near misses and what's needed and what's required and where are we?
That doesn't make any sense. How can the Air Force One not know there were military aircraft occupying the same airspace? Wouldn't it be transponder numbers? Wouldn't the flight engineer or the two or there's two people doing field calculations and chart plotting and all that? Wouldn't they also have their own screens that they can watch and call out and say, hey, is this flight so-and-so from, let's say, for example, Fort Bragg, or Peterson Air Force Base, right? I mean, does that make any sense at all? How would they not know there's other friendlies in the air, right? That just doesn't make any sense. But I do believe this guy, though. So
we have to remember, to a great degree, you've got air traffic control personnel, you've got airline personnel, you've got support company personnel, you've got vehicles moving on the surface, you've got food service trucks moving between planes, you've got baggage cars moving back and forth to get bags from the planes, you've got fuel trucks moving between gates to fuel the planes. We cannot, in this moment, especially with this tremendous loss of life, almost 50 years since the last major mid-air crash in this country, We cannot oversimplify what we think has happened in this moment. We owe it to the memories of the 67 people, many of them young people who were pursuing their dreams, right? Life had not really yet met them in the fullness of its expression. We cannot make this analysis on the cheap. We've got to take time and understand what happened. Were our anticipated procedures that we've used for a while, do they need to be updated, modified? Was there some deviation from that informed what took place that contributed to the crash? Was there a mechanical issue? Was there an issue of personnel? It is too easy to gravitate to what we think might appease the curiosity of folks this soon after such a tragedy. But I go back and I think I found some comfort in the NTSB presser, that you'll get a preliminary report in about 30 days. Right. And then it'll take some time to get the rest of the information.
So while we wait for that information, based on what you've seen so far and based on your experience, what do you think needs to change right away in this particular airspace? Is there anything that stands out, any sort of red flags?
Short answer is I don't know. Right? It starts with evaluating what's there. Right? Start with what you do know. You had procedures in place, were they followed? You had staffing in place, was it sufficient? Were there other things that could have been done? I don't think you can make recommendations in the blind without having sufficient information to make informed decisions. Otherwise, I think we set ourselves up for a future disappointment, and it may not take as long as the last 45 years to get there.
Before we let you go, you come from a family of aviators and controllers. You learned at the foot of your father. You watched your stepmother do this. You then pursued it as a career. Is this still a career worth seeking for future controllers who have an interest in aviation and people and passengers?
I'm biased. Once you find out what air traffic control is, if you get a taste of it, you never get it out of your system. It is by far the most fun, rewarding job I have ever had. Although I've had some pretty...
Even in a pressure cooker environment?
Well, you know,
that's a lot of pressure on you.
It is a lot of pressure, and I didn't realize how much pressure until I was no longer doing it. But when you're doing it, because of what it means, think about it. There were people trying to get to their loved ones last night. There were professionals trying to help them accomplish that. There were military personnel trying to prepare their skills to defend what affects all of us. And in the background were some faithful controllers trying to help make that happen. And so every day it happens. While we go to sleep tonight, there'll be red-eye flights and what we call box haulers moving our packages and promoting commerce and all of that. And when we wake up in the morning, short of there being some notice that something different has happened, we will just take it in stride and keep on moving. This is amongst the most rewarding careers you can have. It's not meant for everybody.
No.
But once you explore it, I promise you, if you're good at it, you'll love it.
Making those important connections.
Todd Yeary, respected expert in air control and a pastor. There's something to this. We thank you for your time and your talent today.
Thanks for the word.
Glad I could contribute. Thank you so much.
Yeah, he's right though. I mean, I used to for about 5.5 years. I mean, I was pretty busy. 2014, 2013, 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, all up to 20. I was doing a lot more. I was doing something every day. It felt so good. It felt great. I did something the 2 weeks before that, I put the inverter in and rearranged the batteries and everything, shortened up the wiring, made sure things are good, just got it working. Then this past Sunday, I went back there and put in the solar charge control. I wanted to make sure it was working correctly. Put rain terminals on the wires, cleaned out their rainwater catchment system, washed out the tank as best I could. The one guy fixed the plumbing. I purged all the air out of the lines and made sure the water heater was working at the off-grid setup. It just felt so good, you know. If you look at that video where I was getting pulled out by the truck, that was after I got it all done. But yeah, I should have made videos about me doing that, but at the same time, I would have had no good camera angles, no way to put the phone, things like that. I just wanted to get the work done, and that way it'll be all good to go. You know what I mean? And hope to go back down there and install the one light, and we'll tidy things up and things like that. And then I need to run power from the main, from the pool house to the inverter, then to the inverter, and from the inverter to the breaker box. That's what I need to do. I need to run the cabling for all that, and get that all tidied up, and then it should be good to go. So, but yeah, it feels good to do that stuff. You know what I mean? So yeah, he's right. But I could never do a job like that. No, I probably would break under pressure or tragedy or something. So anyways, guys, thanks for being here with me, watching it. Thanks for hearing my thoughts on it, commentary and stuff like that. And yeah, I guess we'll see what happens. I mean, you know, he's alright. It takes some time to find out what really happened, I guess, and things like that, and we'll see. So I'll see you guys later. Okay, I'm about to go get out of here, take me a shower at Planet Fitness, and get on over to Starbucks and go from there, you know. So I'll see you guys later.